I joined Rise because I thought that some of the issues that we are addressing here, for example, against austerity, against poverty, and then environmentalism, I thought they are extremely important issues for our lives, the lives that we lead now. So I thought, it's only through the collective voices that we can make ourselves heard. And then I thought the best way to do it together, and that's why I joined Rise.
So I'm just going to start off by saying it's fantastic to see so many people here. I've been here from the start, organising the Scottish Left Project meetings, some in Kirkcaldy, some in Dunfermline, and it's really exciting to be a socialist and things are going well for once. Because usually you're stuck in the corner saying, I don't like capitalism. Well, it's just you sit in the corner and play with your toys, You don't know what you're talking about, you're just young and radical. So it's great to be here and have so many people here turning up to an event about socialist politics, and hopefully tonight we can learn from the past, people like Lauren Gallagher, John McLean, James Connolly, that take things forward in a more progressive way, and I think Rise are doing that and rebranding socialism in a way that appeals to people and not doing it in the old stale, pale, male way that we've been doing things for years, and hopefully this will work. So I think Grant's brought along all these technology stuff, so we're going to karaoke before we start. No, we're not. Basically what we're going to do tonight is it's split into different sessions, so we're going to hear some speeches from Jonathan and Pat to start off with, and then we're going to move into a participatory section, which will be chaired by, Nick's going to chair the Q&A, and Jerry's going to chair, or going to introduce the participatory section so everybody knows what's kind of happening and stuff. So, without further ado, I'll start off with Pat Smith, hopefully tonight, and I hope she'll do a fantastic speech. She's lovely.
Thank you very much. I'm not really going to make a speech at all. No intention of making a speech. I just thought I would share with you the journey that we've had in Edinburgh from the Scottish Left Project to setting up a Rise branch. We don't have all the answers or anything. I've not come along to tell you what you should do, because I think it is really, really important that you decide for yourselves how you're going to do it. And every group that sets up decides exactly for themselves, with the people that, the talent that you have here, the people from different backgrounds, from, with different life experience, that's what you bring here. you know, as much as we can, that's what we've tried to do in Edinburgh. It's obviously quite different in a, you know, in Kirkcaldy, in Dunfermline, in a rural area, is probably to some extent harder than in a city. We're spoiled in a city. You know, we've got, you know, it's quite easy for us to come together. There will be a lot of things happening. We like, you know, we like to plan as much activity as we can, and that's quite easy for us as well, because it's a bus ride or a walk along the road. You're in different circumstances. I'm not painting a black picture for you here, because you're used to your circumstances, you know your community, and you know what you're going to be able to do. So it's not in any way for you to learn from what we've done. You know, I think, as Lewis was saying, I think we don't reject the past. We learn from the past. We learn from the giants that he was talking about. We learn from our own experience, mostly not to make those mistakes again, I think, is what we learn. But, you know, you just think that we don't have 200 members in Edinburgh, but we've got on our list of people that in some stage or other have come along to meetings, about 200 people. And so when you look at that, what's exciting to me about that is that among those people are Polish people, there are Spanish people, there are Greek people, as well as Scottish people, many of them, and there are people from different backgrounds. There are people who have never been in a political party at all. There are people who have been in and out of political parties, and I think that is a really healthy thing, because we all pretty much want the same thing. There will be variations, but we want to change the world, and we're trying to find a vehicle that we can come together and do that. And I think at the moment in Scotland that RISE is that vehicle. I think that if we don't make these mistakes of the past, if we don't do the same things that didn't work, then, and why would we? Because only a fool does that, just keeps doing the same thing and hope that it will be better. But I think the experience that we've had will stand us in good stead. At first, when I heard RISE, I wasn't quite sure, but I think it's such a succinct way with respect, independence, socialism and environmentalism. It helps us to focus. You know, I think that will help you to focus this evening on what it is that we want to do. I think independence, I think we've been well schooled in that in the last couple of years, so we're probably fine with that. I think that as long as we don't start characterising other socialists in particular ways, in that old way of, they're not our kind of socialist, I'm the right kind of socialist, and we're not entirely sure about them. Please don't do that. I'm sure you won't. And I say that to myself as much as anybody else. Be really open. We're people wanting to make change. And whatever we've been in before, or whatever other organisations we're in now, we pretty much want the same things. And together we can really do that. The environment, probably most of us have got a ways to go with that. But I think we're beginning to understand that now, because it's essential. So we'd say to Lewis, don't do what we've done now. We may see, people are talking about my generation of socialists, the world, if we carry on like this, may be fine for me, but for your generation it won't. So it behoves us all to really focus on that. Just finally, I think the respect thing is probably the most important thing, that we respect each other, that we respect other people in the community. I've had the great honour of going to a couple of meetings recently on Turkey and Kurdistan, and there's a man called Murat Gulen, who is the spokesperson for the People's Democratic Party, the Scottish spokesperson for that. Now, people will know, you don't need to know an awful lot about the international scene to know what an absolute horror, what a horrible, repressive regime it is. But their party has got 50-50 through at every kind of level, and as inclusive as possible, you know, to young and old, to women, LGBT, all of these things. They are co-sponsors at absolutely every level. Now, if they can do that, what could possibly be holding us back? And I think that kind of thing, and, you know, so I think that's, you know, we've had a number of meetings, and some of them have been very good, they've not all been good, but we're learning how to do it, and I think I don't need to tell you, you will find for yourself that. But I would say the respect aspect of it, to respect everybody, which I'm sure you do. Be kind to you need to be kind to yourself as well. I think it's very easy to go, oh, I was thinking this or saying that or not doing that as well as we can. You will have great successes, other things won't work quite so well. And just the very last thing is that we're not, of course, just an electoral party, and you know that because I can see you've got an Amazon leaflet and you have other things, and that has brought us, I think it is in Edinburgh, I don't think it's the meetings that, I think we've had some excellent meetings, but what has brought us together is joint activity. One of the things that we did was a Rise Razem meeting with the Polish party, and that has really brought the Polish comrades in, feeling that they're a real part of it. Things like that, just try them.
So at the Scottish Lit Project meetings on Fairmont, I think it was a little bit unfair on Jonathan when I introduced him, and I said there's no saying in my family, and we say, just leave the wafflers to the wafflers. And I said, without further ado, I'll introduce Jonathan to waffling. So I think I'm going to be fair to him. I gave Catboy a nice, lovely introduction. So I think I'll give Jonathan an introduction to himself tonight. Jonathan's a good friend of mine, a lovely guy. Well, he's a good friend of mine before that. He's a great speaker, a committed activist. He doesn't sleep at all because he's always on the phone to me. So without further ado, I'll introduce Jonathan Shaffy to give us his field.
Pat's already outlined well about the development of building a local group. I really just want to say two things. One is political, about the context, and second is technical, about where we are with Rise and where the next number of months will go in terms of the organisation. The first thing, and look, I'm not going to speak for a long time, a couple of minutes, but what I wanted to say was that it's very important at the start of this process that we understand why we're doing what we're doing. And that means more than simply saying that you want, you know, a better society, or a fairer society, or any of these sorts of things. We have to be absolutely sure in our own heads about why Rise. Because all of the political parties will tell you that they want a fairer society or a better society. So why Rise? To me, I think that we need this formation because the radical left in Scotland has shown that when it comes together, it can provide a focal point for people's ideas, for people's energies, and it can actually impact on the political situation. I think we saw that throughout the referendum, where actually if it hadn't been for the intervention in various ways, in myriad ways, of the ideas of the left, I think that we would have achieved 45%. It's a well-known point, but it's worth repeating. It's worth repeating because that intervention has actually shaped Scottish politics since the referendum. Now, it's true that most of the energy has went into the SNP, but if you look at the particular selling points of the SNP, they are left-wing values. So they are opposed to austerity, they are opposed to China, that type of thing. That's how they fought the general election for Westminster. You also have seen major ructions take place inside the Labour Party, where you have seen at their recent conference opposition to Trident now. The Labour Party also now have a harder position on TTIP than the SNP. They outright oppose in policy terms the question of TTIP. Now, the point in saying all of that is because the way in which we will grow, and by we I don't mean Rise specifically, I mean the ideas of the left, pulling society as far as we can to the left, is by our intervention having an impact on the political forces around us. So it's not just about us saying, okay, it was great, I recruited 3 people today. Good news, that's good, right? And we need to recruit, don't get me wrong. But it's about having a mentality that places our activity within a much, much wider context. In other words, we have to start our political vantage point not at the level of what some hundreds of people might think, or some thousands, but about what hundreds of thousands or even millions of people across the country are thinking about. That's important, but what's also important is that the coming years are going to be extremely important, because the economic crisis and the reasons that caused the economic crisis in 2008 haven't gone away. In fact, they've entrenched themselves, they've become more toxic in many ways. And the global situation when it comes to the economy is certainly not a stable one. It's an evolving situation, it's dynamic, we don't know when things might happen, but what we know is that the economic crisis in the UK is going to reappear in stark terms over the coming years. We do know this, we know that the UK's economic framework is a complete bizarre way of setting up your economy. For example, all of the banks in London are all based on casino capitalism. There's no national investment bank, like in Germany where they have a diverse banking system. Okay, the point in saying this is that big events are going to happen. Big economic events, global events in terms of various conflicts that are taking place in the UK, right across the UK, social explosions as a part of the austerity agenda. I mean, what's happening with austerity is now reaching a point where there's real contradictions beginning to express themselves. Now, within that, within those processes, within all of that kind of complexity, and this is why, very specifically, you need to have an organisation which has an analysis of why this is happening that goes beyond rhetoric, a clear view of how you solve it and what forces are needed to solve it. Our analysis starts from the system, that it's not because of some bad policies here or there, that actually we have a serious vantage point, a worldview about the system. In other words, we're not in favour of triangulation. So if you look at the SNP, for example, right, many people would say that they have a worldview which can relate to them and that type of thing. But in reality, it's policy choices that are being made. It's decisions being made about how you keep one side happy and another side happy at the same time. Okay, so fracking, for example, is one of these issues. You say there's a moratorium, but you also say to anyone else you can start test drilling. Right? Now, that comes from a method of operating. It comes from not having an ideological position on what's going on in the world, and that's why Rise. I don't think any other political formation in Scotland has what we are attempting to develop. And just lastly on the political situation, that means our orientation on the political situation has to be one which is a dynamic one. For example, in Motherwell, there are huge numbers of job cuts, steel and council job losses, right? It's not the case that what Rise should do, in my opinion, and this is for discussion amongst all the circles, but as an example, you could go in and immediately set up a Rise meeting saying, here's the socialist answer to the job losses. You could do that, and it might be a useful thing to do, but in fact it might not be the priority. I think the priority in that situation is to start to draw together broad forces that can actually make a real difference on the ground, and as a result of that, you build the political culture, the organisational mechanisms through which you can start to develop Rise seriously, with real social forces, not just propaganda. That's the style of politics I think that we have to adopt. We are building for an election, but we are also building a movement, genuinely building a movement, not just building, not just turning up at the demo and giving out leaflets, but actually building the demo, being the people who are organising the meetings that build the demonstrations. That's what they did in Greece and Spain and other places where the left has taken off. Okay, the last point is technical, and this will be very, very quick indeed, which is that if we agree on at least some of that, how we organise ourselves, we made a commitment throughout this whole process that it would be led by the grassroots. So we have on the 5th of December a democratic conference. That conference will set out and will deliberate our flagship policies. It's not going to come up with a 50-page manifesto, but it will come up with the 9 or 10, and again, not just slogans, but real policies, right, which can be bite-sized into something sellable to people. It will draw that together, and the way we're doing that is through a series of forums which lead up to that conference. Hopefully the materials are being circulated, the questions of communication will evolve over time, but these forums are places where people will come to delegates from each circle to discuss. So, for example, on Saturday there's a forum discussing policies. We'll have that discussion, meaning that your circle, you'll be able to have a serious discussion about policy work before you get to the conference. So you're not turning up to the conference, not with a clue of what's going on, but you've actually had a say in what's going on from the outset. Very lastly, and there's much more to say about all the technical aspects, but I won't bore you, but very lastly, candidates will be, we'll put out a call for nominations for candidates, the details of which will be circulated. There will be particular stipulations. For example, probably will need 5 nominations or something like that. And we hope to have these selected before the end of the year, but after the conference, right? The idea being that when we move into 2016, and this is where I'll end, when you move into 2016, you've got your flagship policies, you have your materials, you have your candidates, and you've got circles set up right across Scotland. We're now nearly in 30 circles. And bringing all that together is that political analysis, which I think if we stick to, if we understand fully, will allow us to become possibly the story of this election. We're not yet the story of the election, but I think next year with that kind of approach we could be, and that can lead on to bigger things for the development of the left in general terms as we move forward.
We'll just look at each other. Watch. Did you want an introduction like Jonathan? A nicer or less nice?
A less nice, quicker introduction.
This is Jerry. He takes copious notes at every meeting and has developed a lovely wee plan for us tonight where we're going to work through some discussions. At the meetings that we've had already, some of the circle meetings that we've had already in Burnham and Kirkcaldy and the St Andrews, we decided that we hate listening to big board speakers at top tables and sit and wait to the question and answer to have our say. So we decided that sitting in circles, talking to each other, writing things on mind maps suits us, and it gives everybody a chance to talk instead of just listening to arseholes like me. So, without further ado, I shall introduce Jerry, who is Jerry Hasty. Jerry Hasty, you should have known that. Jerry's worldwide famous. So Jerry's going to introduce the participatory section, which I've read over in the emails for once, and it looks fantastic. So take it away, Jerry.
Thanks for giving me that really big introduction, Lucas. I was kind of kidding, but I really appreciate it. You know, I'm actually a pitch to be Lewis as special advisor to the First Minister. Yeah, instead of kind of going away up into tables, as I know that many of us have done at previous kind of sort of political events and end up in a discussion about something, what I thought we'd devise is something a little bit different, a little bit more fluid, you know, perhaps on the kind of notion of circles and kind of moving around and all that sort of thing. And so we've kind of, if you look around the room, and you'll see these lovely posters, if you like, and that which Alan and I drew up last night, and that using our wonderful DIY punk ethic, and I kid you not, this ended up in Alan playing GBH bass lines on my acoustic bass, and I know your room, so and if that doesn't get anything to anybody, then ask me around privately. But we've got posters up around the room, we've got post-it notes, we've got pens, we've got little pieces of paper there, kind of saying something about each of the kind of themes here that we've got up. And these themes, you know, came from the kind of sort of democracy now, you know, kind of sort of sections of meetings, and it'll launch back in August. And it's not that, you know, I certainly don't think that one policy fits into one thing, if you like. It's about thinking in a kind of an interconnected way, if you like. So what I'd like to do is people to use the pens, use the post-it notes, you know, write down ideas and talk to each other, you know, make notes about what you say, you know, put it on all the posters and the post-it notes. And tonight is really the start of it being a process, and that kind of idea of you know, we're more about the kind of sort of 1,000 people on the streets and 1 foot in Parliament, you know, rather than being a kind of top-down thing. And that this is the idea about circles actually being sort of engines of kind of sort of policy making, an idea making that we will kind of sort of feed up the way. And the idea is to involve people, and that you are both members and non-members, and that can come to circle meetings as well, in terms of developing ideas that will make Rise work, if you like. You know, so what we're going to ask people to do is just to kind of mill around, have conversations, and use the post-it notes. You know, put little comments, little posters around, you know, and let's hopefully get some interesting ideas and some interesting conversation going. All right. Basically, during the referendum, I felt that Rick, you know, sort of spoke to me. You know, they were a big part of that movement, and certainly that captured a lot of what I, you know, sort of seemed to feel, what I sort of believe about the way that kind of politics and that issue be done. I mean, it feels totally grassroots. There's a real feeling of being built from the bottom up. You know, we have in Scotland a real movement and a democracy just now where political debate has actually become normal, everyday kind of sort of day-to-day conversation, you know, more so than I've ever known in my lifetime. And essentially, you know, I want politics to be about the day-to-day, about the things that matter, about well-being, about equality of opportunity, about nurturing, encouraging politics, and that where it really doesn't matter, you know, where your background is, you know, where your background is from, and that, I guess ultimately, you know, it's the belief that we can create politics that puts all of us first. You know, essentially, Rise aims to represent the 100% and not the 1%.
Quite like the SNP because they're a vehicle for independence, but I'm not too happy with some or all of some of their policies. So I want to see what alternative parties were maybe moving on into the political scene. I was quite happy to hear the ideas of Bryce tonight as well, with Scottish elections coming up, and then maybe didn't want to particularly put SNP 1 and SNP 2 because I don't really see an alternative to vote in Scotland. So I'd really like to have an idea and see what Rise is about. It could possibly be Rise 1, SNP 2 or SNP 1, Rise 2. That was my main reason, so I'm just here to hear some ideas of what's going on and what's on offer and what's on the table tonight. Thank you.